Hey, what's up? It's Bon, and this is a new episode of the EchoCast. And today I have a guest, is rxlyaT, aka George. You may know him from his YouTube, his old coverage of The Division, or current coverage of survival games, or the things that you may not know he's been doing at Ubisoft Massive. So please enjoy our conversation. We've known each other for a long time. I think that shows during the chat. I think we had a good chat about how we got into gaming, just all kinds of stuff with games in general. And we talk a little bit about Division and a lot about a lot of things. So check it out, and I will see you after. Today, I have George, aka rxlyaT, on the show, and we're going to talk about a whole bunch of stuff. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you so much for having me on. I think it's something we spoke about end of last year, maybe.
It was a while ago. I've been intending to do this for quite a while, and I'm finally going through it with it.
You're a busy guy. You've always been a busy guy. Ever
Always.
Since I think we both sort of like fell into similar lanes. I've always
Sure.
known you as somebody that just has too much for me. Like I wouldn't be able to do everything that you do, but yeah.
I do a whole bunch and not much comes of it, and that's totally fine with me because I'm doing it for fun, and that's okay. I think the big thing for me, and I think something probably for you at this point, is not everyone's gonna be PewDiePie or whatever. Most people doing this kind of stuff, making content, doing podcasts, you better be doing it for fun, because especially today, it's hard to make it, and I think the window for people to just fall into it has probably kind of closed years ago, especially in like the gaming space. But really, I think in creation in general, now I think it's about who you know and things like that. But that's fine. Like, I don't want to make it. I have a job.
Yeah.
like I have.
I think when you say about the window getting or closing, I think it's definitely like a lot smaller than it was, because obviously the less people doing it, you're still kind of unique. Whereas like the more people trying to get into it, you've really got to stand out. And I think that's where we see people like Mr. Beast on YouTube just doing the absolute craziest of things.
Because you have to, because everyone now can do what we're doing. Right now, it's simple. It's so easy. Everyone has a webcam, everyone has a mic, everyone has headphones, and so I'm perfectly fine with just doing the thing I do. But like, it's so interesting in the whole space, whether it's social media or YouTube or Twitch or wherever, that there's a million balding white guys who like to play video games out there. And so you have to bring something unique, whether it's, your content or the way you present it or whatever. And so I think that's been kind of an interesting thing. With me, I've always felt like I've always gone like a third into 1,000 things, and that's fine. It's fun. I'm just doing it for giggles. So yeah. So some things I wanted to talk with you about today is kind of like your history with gaming. Obviously, we'll talk a little bit about, both of our origins to a point. We can talk about E3 a little bit back in the day. Who would have known that we would have gone to what was probably the second to last real E3?
Yeah.
So we can chat about that. And then what you're doing now, both content-wise and work-wise. So games, what originally got you into video games?
I think it was my dad showing me the Sega Mega Drive and the original Sonic game. I think it was the original Sonic game. I don't think anything came before that. But I remember him turning that out one day, and then it was sort of like, okay, this is fun. This seems like a lot more fun than, I don't know what I was doing then, like drawing or something. And then it was just
crayons.
Yeah, exactly. Like I was probably like, I don't know, just doing some weird stuff. So I remember playing the Sega Mega Drive with my older brother and my dad, and then I think I went to the PlayStation 1 then 2, and obviously in between like Game Boys, Pokemon. I was a massive Pokemon kid when I was younger. So yeah, and then just like went from there, I guess, like PlayStation 1, 2, and then I jumped over to Xbox, had a couple of the Xbox consoles, and then in between I've just gone over to PC, and I still play console. I have the PlayStation 5. It's used more of a media console for watching. Homeland at the moment is the show I'm addicted to. So
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, the wow, you bring up Game Boy. That really, because I think, oh my God, I'm trying to. So I know at some point in my life we had access to a Super Nintendo. So playing like the old Marios, like the OG Marios, and like Duck Hunt and all of that. I'm trying to think if the Mega Drive had a different name here in the States. I think
I know there's a couple variations of it as well.
Because now I remember pretty clearly around probably like primary school or like elementary school, middle school. I think I had a Sega CD, which I'm pretty sure was the first disc-based console.
Yeah.
And it was a nightmare. It was awful. It was so bad because, like the reading technology of the CD drives back then was like, that's back when before they even had the buffers on like portable CD players that would like preload songs. So I think I'm a little bit older than you. So maybe some of this stuff is, dating me a bit, but yeah, like that was that time, like the old Sonic games and stuff like that, and like the OG like Mario and stuff like that, and then Pokemon, man. It just like I remember my stupid little Game Boy Color. I think I had like one of the translucent purple ones, which in hindsight, like those were so cool, like so cool, and just like the stupid, like the awful sounds that the Pokemon would make. It's still just so iconic though, so
that's the thing, like you can hear it, like somebody can mention it and you can hear that sound
right now. Yep. And now I do think maybe Nintendo needs to stop using some of those old sounds in their literally newest games. I think maybe they're playing, they can update those a bit, but well, what do you remember? Like, what do you remember being like the first game that you just like couldn't get away from, that you're sneaking into the living room to play? Or
I think it was one of them I remember not being able to put down was, I think it was Pokemon Fire Red at the time. So this was Game Boy Advance, and this obviously one of the color ones. And I remember being on holiday once in Cyprus, I think, and it was obviously so my mum and dad and my 2 brothers. And I met this guy, the same age as me, who was also massively into Pokemon. And he told me about being able to get to another region, I think, in the game. I could be completely wrong now, but this is so long ago. Sure. And so I went out for a meal with my family that night, and I said to my friend, I can't remember his name now, and I said, like, can you take my cartridge and can you get me to this island? So I gave him my cartridge. I came back from the meal. I was sat there. He was sat like on our like porch thing, waiting for us to get back from the meal. He's like, George, I've done it. Here you go. And we just sat there for like 2 or 3 more hours. This was when like you had bedtimes, and I just remember like it kind of felt like experiencing my favorite game all over again, because I didn't know that this part existed. And I just remember not being able to put it down. Like, my mum would be like, okay, George, you got to go to bed now. I'll take your Game Boy. And I was like, no, like, you're not. I played it like the whole holiday there. I think I sat under the shade the whole time just so I could see the screen. That was the first game that I guess I got addicted to. It was, yeah.
It's, the modern way of gaming. And it's so interesting for me to think about what it's like for kids nowadays. To have games, like to have the Switch, like the idea of being a child with a Switch right now just blows my mind, because I kind of
think, I just wanted to say that I kind of think games are not too readily available, but like are so available that you kind of don't have the experience like me and you did as a kid, where like Game Boys was the only thing you could game on. Like, you don't have games on your phone, you can't, like,
and you had one game.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
you had, like, you didn't have Game Pass where you had access to hundreds of games. You had one, and like as far as you knew when you were a little kid, it's the only game that ever existed. And like
Yeah.
I had, now this, it really ages me, the Game Boy. I remember having a Game Boy that had a light because they didn't have
Yeah.
backlights at first. So if you wanted to play in the dark, you had to have a light that shined on it. And it was just like, there was something about that moment. And then like what you said about that, the kid saying, oh, here, like, did you know about this new region? Well, you know, we didn't have Google. You know, so
Yes. Yeah.
we
Yeah.
didn't know everything about everything. And so now it went both ways, because you could have someone like that who's kind and honest, or you could have the other side where it'd be like, well, if you hit this and you go to this place, you can find a Mewtwo that's purple. And like,
Mm.
and then people would just lie, right, about things that
Yeah.
were in the
Yeah.
games because you couldn't fact check them. Now you whip out your phone and you say, that doesn't sound right. Yeah, you're a liar.
Yeah.
Or you pull out and find out that's true. That was just such a
It's,
moment in gaming where there were mysteries. You know, there were
mm.
still mysteries. There were still like, you know, things that you could figure out. There were cheat codes because, you know, now it's all DLC. You know, like it's
Yeah.
it was just a moment. And I don't think it's better or worse today. I just think it's different. But that like that 90s era of video gaming, I think, was really unique. And and I think that we're missing something from that. Well, we've also gained a lot of things as well. So
It's a good thing about that is that I really miss game guides. I can't remember the brand. I think it was like Prima or something. And you used to be able to go into a shop, pick up the game, and then
yeah.
spend like £10 on like a massive thick game guide. I remember printing off one for Legend of Zelda Minish Cap. Again, this was on Game Boy, and this was a few weeks after my dad got a printer, and like ink was still expensive. So I was like, Dad, please, it's only a couple of pages. I think I printed off like 200 pages, and I got so grounded for that.
Yeah. Yeah, you had to like sell the car to pay for that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It was just it was a different time. And what's so funny is like I worked at GameStop when I was in college, and we still sold those guides, and people still bought them because they were nice. Like they were nice to get you through certain games, but they also had like something special about them. They were the art in them was typically very high quality and really cool. It was just like, just to throw it on a shelf. You know, it was a
Yeah.
collector's item to a point, and I can't tell you if they even make those anymore. I drove by my old GameStop yesterday, and it's still open. I had no idea. Like
Wow.
I had no idea that was still a thing. So that is funny. So as time has gone on, what would you say, like kind of currently, or I guess even historically, you maybe don't play games in these genres anymore, but what would you say have been like your favorite genres of video games?
It's really difficult to say because I kind of compare this with my taste in music. Like it can vary so drastically, and I'll just go through spells of like listening to something that I wouldn't have even spent 30 seconds listening to. So I'd say like gaming wise, it really does vary. Like I can be heavily into first person shooters depending what's out. And then it'll be loot and shooters. Obviously, like the Division was something that just captured me and really held me. But lately it's been like MMORPGs, like New World that came out. Um, I'm currently playing old school RuneScape, which is a game that I played in school.
Mhm.
So yeah, like it really varies, but there's always going to be like Call of Duty that I'll go back to. I mean, I remember spending like too much time on that when during the summer breaks at school. Um, I was probably a very vulgar kid online, like in those Call of Duty lobbies. But I mean, yeah, I've made so many friends through those types of games, or that time period anyway, of like the 360. So yeah, it just does really vary. I'm definitely looking forward to the new Call of Duty.
Same.
I don't know if that was the next question, like what are you looking forward to? But yeah, that's a couple of games out, but it's hard to say like that's my favorite genre because of course like I'll always go back and play FIFA as well. So
Sure. Hmm? Yeah, I had so probably the earliest genre I really got into was real time strategy. The early Age of Empires game, but then Age of Empires 2, and which was just like, even though I've invested thousands of hours into games like The Division, Escape from Tarkov, other games that, like the Madden, FIFAs, things like that, if I could go back and count my playtime, I'm willing to bet Age of Empires 2 is still my most played game. And that real time strategy genre, the StarCraft and things like that, Command and Conquer, like just like those games. Oh, they were just so cool. And like as a younger person, you felt like you could do anything with them. And then like I started playing online on like old dial-up internet connections and stuff, and which was just a shit show. It was just a nightmare.
When you used to get a phone call and the internet would drop.
So I was a spoiled child. We had 2 phone lines, and one was just for the internet. Yeah, I got very lucky with that, and that was when I was in high school. So that was a little bit later. But what was really interesting for me as I look back, and I was so lucky timing wise, where when I went to college in 2006, and I hit a moment where when I was in college, living in dorms with a bunch of other guys my age, Halo came out, Call of Duty 4 came out, like some of the best multiplayer games ever. Halo 2, like best multiplayer, and we had high-speed internet at college, and we could do LAN parties through the school's network, and like at the time it was just cool. We were just playing games till 3 a.m, right? But now as an adult, I look back and like, I mean, if I would have gone to college 4 years earlier or 4 years later, I wouldn't have been in that moment of like with Call of Duty 4. The guys in my dorm, it was actually all of us in a row. We all had rooms beside each other. Went to, was it called Battlegrounds, where you could do like clan, like tournaments.
Yeah, it was the MLG thing, right?
And so we played, and we got to the point we played so much that we got ranked like in the top like 10 in the world for a moment. Like it was we weren't that good, but it was just like we just played a lot. And that was just, again, it's another one of those things. Like I don't want to be too nostalgic. Games weren't perfect back then, and games are really great right now in their own ways. But that was just, it was such a, we didn't realize what we were experiencing. We didn't realize how important the games we were playing were for the future of video games, because we were just a bunch of college kids playing games, drinking Mountain Dew, eating Doritos, doing the thing. But that genre thing is, like you said, is interesting, because we said before that there just weren't as many games back in the day, and now there's so many that I don't think there's too many people who are genre defined anymore. And I think that's great. I think that's how it should be. But it's interesting. So what I guess well, you said like what games you're looking forward to. And so you said Call of Duty. It's so funny how that's almost like a bad word now, to be excited about Call of Duty. I think it's so silly, because like their campaigns are always so entertaining. I always get real hard into the PvP, they're the 4v4 and stuff like for a minute, but now they have Warzone, and obviously we have a new Warzone coming. What do you think about that kind of move in the kind of like the pop video games? It's kind of like how like pop music was never one genre. It was just whatever was popular in the moment. It feels like the current version of that for games is battle royales, free to play, live service, have your battle pass. What do you just how do you feel about that move, just kind of in general?
I think the way I see it is something like this is companies are trying, or at least trying to follow a trend where they can involve as many people as possible. So like, I mean, I'm a big solo player. I've always played games a lot solo, but I think like things like battle royales where, the aim is for you to be the last man standing, but like if you can include that person that really into the game and then like their friends as well, then that's like 5 more people that are playing your game. I think it is really about encapsulating a community, because people tend to do things together and have more fun that way. I mean, when I'm playing solo games, I'll still be in a Discord call with like 5 or 6 other friends just chatting nonsense. So, I mean, it'll be interesting to see where it goes, because I can't remember what was before this. Like, it just feels like battle royales have been around for like 10, 15 years, and in theory, they've been around for 4 or 5.
Whenever I notice how still relatively new Fortnite is, that it feels like it's been around for 20 years. I don't hate on Fortnite. I don't personally love Fortnite. I can't really get into it, but I have so much respect for that game for essentially defining gaming for the last 3 or 4 years, in so many ways. Sure. And the fact that now you can like shoot Goku with Superman with a shotgun, like that. Fortnite is a game. Imagine telling like the 12-year-old version of yourself what Fortnite is.
It would be like your dream game, right?
It's what we all thought games like, man, I want to be able to be so-and-so and do this and do that and fight this person. And it was like, it was like a pipe dream. Like you'd think that you were crazy, but now Fortnite exists and you can play Rick and Morty fighting Master Chief with Kratos. Like, that sounds insane.
It's wild. It's but also I was just thinking then about like what was before this, and you know that I'm a big survival games fan, so like,
oh yeah,
you can easily compare a battle royale to a survival game in my eyes. And kind of before PUBG, I think a lot of people agree with me saying that DayZ kind of spawned a lot of these, where it was like, okay, your aim here of this game is to spawn in, loot yourself up, and then survive. And then it's almost like people have played that game and then been like, oh, I really like this feature, but I think we could do this instead. And then like they've just
condensed it.
Yeah, they've just exactly. And it's kind of like I don't know if this will make any sense, but when you are first starting to bake, like the first cake you make is going to be like kind of there, but then like the 400th cake you make is so like, there's nothing wrong with it. The flour is perfect. The amount of eggs you use is perfect. There's no shell in it. Like,
you've learned to sift. You sift the flour because that makes it better. Sure.
And I think that's what we see with this is like, and then maybe it's just going to go back the other way. Like, we're going to be playing a game similar to PUBG, and then we're like, but maybe let's make the rounds unlimited, and the only way for you to play again is if you die. So, and then you just like start back at a survival game and then go through the loops.
Yeah, it's so interesting. So my personal favorite like battle royale is actually Apex. I love Apex Legends. That game, it just I really like the Titanfall games, and that studio just has such a good feel for just meaty, like responsive gameplay, like their gunplay and their movement mechanics, like they're just so good at that with Respawn. That's right. What I think is so interesting about that is that so much of the conversation, I think that there's such a blind spot with someone like me to like mobile gaming and stuff like that, where like you don't realize that these big publishers they're putting out these like AAA, AA, free to play video games on consoles and PC and stuff, but you don't realize that they're making like 70% of their money, and they have millions and millions of people playing like the phone versions of games, or phone games specifically. Like I saw some stat for, it was like Diablo Immortal, that, you know, regular gamers, if that's what you want to call them, ragged on. And that game made like $100 million in the first month or something. Yeah. And then you have like Call of Duty Mobile and PUBG Mobile. I think Apex is on mobile now. Like, you have all these games going, you know, not to get into our own backyard, but you have that Division mobile game coming out that looks like it's just going to be like a Division game. It's not going to be like
exactly.
a VR or something. And so like, and I've seen so many people like on the subreddit and stuff for the Division be like, well, why would they make that? No one wants that. I was like, that game is going to make more games, make more money than the Division 1 and 2 together, which were successful games. It's going to beat both of them probably. And it's probably going to have more players than either one ever had. And you may not like that. I'm probably not going to play it. I'm sure I'll check it out. I'm curious about it. But it's, even though it's not for me, like, I think that there's this thing of realizing that, you know, if you're not 18, you may not be the target for these games. And not everyone has a console, but everyone has a phone. And so I think you can't really talk about like current gaming trends and stuff like that and completely ignore the mobile unless, you know, you still don't see like in gaming media and reviewers and like no one really covers the mobile except the people who do. But
like some of the biggest YouTube atmosphere though, or streamers, mobile streamers, and it's kind of like this weird separate entity that everyone like bashes on until you're exactly like you said, until you're part of it or until you're interested in it, you don't realize just how big it is.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I think the coolest thing with mobile now is that I mean, when I was a kid, and I'm sure when you were a kid, your parents would tell you like, okay, that's enough gaming now. Like, go outside and do something, like play football, whatever. But now, like, I can finish playing RuneScape on my PC with all of my friends. I can get into bed, and my partner will be like, "Oh, let's put on a film." We're like, "Yeah, that's fine." She'll fall asleep in 5 minutes, and then I can load up RuneScape on my phone anyway. So it's like, the world we live in now is where games are so readily available. It's almost like you never stop playing it.
Well, and you can even load up something like Game Pass or something on your phone.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like you can play Gears of War 5 on your phone. Like
it's crazy.
You can play Fortnite, like the legit Fortnite, not even the mobile version, on your phone. Like it's so interesting. And I think that there's a lot of like negativity around it and people actually I'll tell you what, and maybe this isn't completely correct, before the BR was like the dominant genre, I think it'd be fair to say like open world games was kind of the big fad before that, which, you know, obviously Ubisoft was a pretty big player in that space. Other publishers and developers as well. But that just hit me of like, I feel like the big trend before BR was open world.
But then BR kind of takes from open world. It's like if you're playing a BR game, you're going to be playing a massive open world.
Essentially, because even like Apex or Fortnite and stuff, like, well, hell, Fortnite is hardly even a BR anymore. It is, because it's a battle to the last. But I was watching a stream last night, someone streaming Fortnite, and I didn't know that you can go into Fortnite now and not even try to fight anyone and play an entire round of doing like obstacle courses. You can fish, I guess. You can like do all kinds of shit.
Wait, you can fish in Fortnite?
Yes, you can fish for health. You have a fishing rod. I don't know if that's in the current season or whatever, but it has been in it before. There's PvE. There's like bosses that you can find and fight. Like it's wild. And it's just, but like you said before, I was actually going to talk about some of the survival stuff later, but that's fine. We can talk about it now. So I never played the mod version of DayZ, the mod of, was it Arma 2?
Yeah. Arma 2. I think it was called Operation Arrowhead you had to have, which was like the DLC.
Yep. But I was a day one pre-order owner of the standalone.
Yeah.
Which was what, like 8-9 years ago? Maybe I
think 10? It's probably close to 10. Yeah. Oh. I remember actually with the standalone, I was working in a supermarket at the time in England. And I think I was on my lunch break or just finishing, and my friend Tom had gifted me the standalone version.
Oh, wow.
Just like completely out of the blue. Like we had played the mod a lot together, and I just saw this email saying like, oh, so-and-so has gifted. I was like, what? And so that's where, I mean, obviously, I played the mod a lot, but that was on like a really, really bad PC where I got like 10 to 15 frames.
Sure.
It was
that was so interesting to me because I have a solid few hundred hours in that game and haven't played it in legit like 6 years. I dabble, I've jumped in and out. I think what's so interesting about that standalone game, I think I played it, I jumped back in last year. I feel like I used to watch Shroud a lot, and he got really into DayZ, the standalone. And so off of him, I started playing it again. And it was so interesting because the experience of jumping back into that game after so many years was a real mixed bag of, wow, they've added so much, but also, man, this looks the same as it did 10 years ago. Like, this game does not look like a modern game. Like, it's really, but they've added so much. It's weird.
Yeah. It's an interesting point that you pick up on, because I've always thought actually that DayZ has always kind of looked pretty good. Like back then, it was probably like one of the best looking games.
Sure.
And now, there's some incredible looking games. We can see what Unreal Engine 5 is doing to games and other engines for that matter. But like, even now, when I'm playing DayZ, I'm like, this game hasn't had like an engine update in like 4 or 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, it's still like, unless you like zoom in at the ground, or like you're really far away from a tree and it goes flat. It's kind of like, this game still looks pretty crazy.
You have to account for scale.
Yes, of course.
I think gamers now are really spoiled by how good games look. That a game the scale of DayZ is stupid. Like it's like I've learned a lot about game development. Obviously, I'm just a guy who just talks about games, but I feel like I have gotten to learn a lot about how they actually work and how they're made and things like that. And it's just, if you had a whiteboard and you wrote down all the things that DayZ is, the simple fact is that groundbreaking graphics aren't going to be on that list because they can't be. You can't make a game that big with that many people. It just doesn't work. Like, you have to give up, you have to concede somewhere. And people don't play DayZ for the graphics. They play it for the experience and the mechanics and all that stuff. And you see that a lot with that whole genre. That whole genre is so interesting to me because it has to be, at least from my perspective, like the most forgiving player base in games of people who are willing to just wait. Like the DayZ standalone, for example. I mean, that's been a long project that's still extremely popular. And even with you, like your coverage on your current YouTube of covering, survival games are a dime a dozen in many ways, especially on Steam and like early access and stuff like that. But they wouldn't exist if there wasn't an audience. And so someone like me can look at it from the outside and be like, why are people wasting their time with these games that, these developers have bitten off way more than they can chew? Like, obviously these are teams of like 5 or 10 people a lot of times, trying to make an experience that rivals AAA games in a lot of ways. And I guess, how do you, especially because you've kind of seen the other side of things in your current job, like kind of how has that changed, or kind of what's your current outlook on all of those kind of grassroots survival games that are trying to make it?
I think like it's hard to, I don't know, but like what I want to say is that people have a passion for the game they want to make, and they don't realize what goes into making that game until they actually try it. Like, I'm sure there was a time in my life when I was younger and I didn't really understand game development too well. I mean, I do to a degree now, but I'm not a developer. So, but seeing, like early access titles, and you think, this is going to be my dream game, and you're like, why is it so crap? And then it's not until you realize how much goes into making a game, how almost everyone has to be aligned in the same vision. Like, Yeah, there's games out there that have worked with a really small audience. Like Valheim, for example, is the perfect example of this. Like it can work for sure. I think it's just about understanding the processes behind that and putting your vision that you have floating around in your head onto something materialistic and making that happen is a very difficult task. And I'm not saying that it can be done. Everyone has dreams, and that's brilliant. We wouldn't be here if we didn't have our own dreams. So
Sure.
I think it's just until you do it, you don't really understand, I guess, what you're getting yourself into. So
it's something I've learned from getting to know, like especially through the division, getting to know developers and getting to meet people and things like that. It's a miracle that bad games get released, let alone or finished. Like a game that comes out and gets like a 5 out of 10. That game has thousands of hours of hard work from many people. It's like their baby. Let alone the fact that a good game ever gets released, because it shouldn't happen. It should be impossible. So it's like it's so interesting in how you kind of, from the outside, you just, game development from a consumer's point of view is just a machine. You throw an idea in, it mixes up, and then it shoots out the other side, and you want it to be a 10 out of 10. You want every game that comes out to be a God of War or a Last of Us or, whatever your favorite game is. And you just don't realize, like, some of the stories I've heard about the development of like the Division and other games as well. And that, like, it's just wild that any game has ever been released ever.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I just know that the people that I work closely with are so passionate about what they do. And that's what I love to see. Like you said then, that from the outside, people see that a game is just released and it's like, oh yeah, I'm going to play this now. And then I'm going to talk crap about it because I don't like it. And it's like, there's so many people that have put like their time, like blood, sweat and tears pretty much into this game. They've like, I don't know, worked overtime or something. Like there's so many ramifications to making games nowadays that is so, yeah, there's going to be games that I don't like, but I'm never going to turn around and tell that publisher or tell the developers that, your game sucks, because games aren't for everyone. Yeah, people have a different idea of what perfect is all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But like, it is so hard to see. I guess sometimes it's warranted in a professional way. Like if you can give feedback professionally, then yeah, I would warrant that. But yeah, like I said, working with the people that I do now and seeing how passionate they are about games is definitely opened my eyes, like the past 3 years, to be like, okay, I kind of wish I had seen this sooner from like a growing up point of view, but also I wish other people could see and understand what does go into a game.
Like I see something, like I didn't like Hyperscape. I didn't care for it. Wasn't my cup of tea. But especially in more recent years where maybe I've matured more or I've gotten to know more about how this stuff works, is that like, that's a nightmare. Like that sucks so bad for a game to just stop, because people worked so hard on that.
Yeah.
Like that was like, and even getting to talk to people, like I talked to Mark Dara in my last interview about like Anthem and Mass Effect Andromeda, games that were not received real well. They weren't loved. They are by a group of people does love those games, but critically they didn't do well. But people worked so hard on those games, and like, and I guess what's interesting about it all to me is how I've in the years, as the years have gone by, my honest take is that I don't think feedback matters. I don't think the average gamer has, including someone like myself, has any right to give feedback. I'm glad those channels are open, and I'm glad that there's places for people to commiserate together and like be like, oh, I really hate they do that, and then someone else be like, yeah, me too, I really hate that. But like I've really questioned over the years, like how useful community feedback is, and I guess and what's changed in my mind is I used to think of video games as like a service, as there's this company, there's this group of people who want to know what you want from the game. You know, what do you, and I've really changed my opinion a lot over the years of, I now think of game developers as like a band. And, you know, most bands don't go into the studio and ask their fans, what kind of music do you want us to make? They make the music that they're passionate about. They have an idea for an album or a song, a concept, and they just go away and they make that album and they cut it and then they put it out. And either their fans like it or they don't. But they make the album that they're happy with. And I really think that game development should be the same way, because you see games come out that are obviously meant to be big hits, and you can tell like when a game has been made in such a way that it was meant to be like, we want this to be popular, we want this to be the next Fortnite or whatever. But then you also see games come out that like no one consulted anyone on. A group of people just got together and made it. And a game like that, I would almost say like Hades. I don't know if you ever checked out Hades. I played it a little bit. I'm just not very good at those games, but that's a game that like, I feel like even like Valheim that you mentioned, like something tells me that Valheim wasn't doing like product testing with large groups of people. I bet a fairly small number of people just got together and made something they're passionate about.
I guess that's how it went. It was something like that, like just like a group of friends maybe got together and were like, let's make this style of game. We enjoy. I don't know if this is exactly, but like, let's say they all enjoyed Minecraft. They're like, yeah, I really enjoyed Minecraft, but I also really enjoy these features, and I enjoy this setting. Let's see if we can do. Like I said, let's see if we can make our own dream game.
Sure.
And sometimes passion pays off, and that's exactly what happened with Valheim.
Because like I've even tried to talk to people about, and this is somewhat informed speculation, but you know, like when there's a beta for a game or like a PTS, like a game that we're both familiar with, I'm willing to bet that the back end numbers that are collected from that are 1,000 times more useful than the guy who jumps on the forum and says, well, I don't like that this thing does this. It's, you know, people need to realize that you know, like the numbers collected of, you know, they can look and see how many people ran this mission and how quickly they did it, how many times they died. Like that kind of information is so much more useful than a guy who doesn't like the way that rifle looks, you know. And not to say that consumer feedback is completely useless. I'm sure it's very useful in a lot of ways. I've just really come to the point where I've started to think about like, whether it's with games we're familiar with or not, or just the overall gaming, like I feel like comm devs, community developers, their jobs now are like partially collecting feedback and partially like kindergarten teachers, where they're just kind of trying to satisfy the children. They're just kind of trying to keep the kids from pooping on the floor, and they're trying to keep the kids from running out the door. They're just trying to keep everyone, hey, we're good. Let's just stay all together here. Maybe I'm burned out or biased or something at this point. I don't know, but it really, like, I don't envy the jobs of these people who are community facing in game development, because I wouldn't be. I can tell you that if I was a game dev, I would delete my Twitter. I would just go to work and do my thing and then go home and not give a shit, you know, which is obviously, I commend the people who aren't like that. And we both know a lot of people who engage, and I think that's really cool. But man, I don't know if they get paid enough for it.
I mean, unfortunately, like, it's a big debate at the moment, is people hiding behind keyboards, and it's a shame that there are like these community facing people that, like you said, me and you have worked with closely before, take the brunt of this, as well as like public facing developers. We've seen like our friends like
Sure.
receive horrible messages.
Yep.
And it's weird to like, if you try and put yourself in that person's shoes sending this horrible message, it's just like, this, at the end of the day, this is a game that people are making because they're passionate about it and they want you to enjoy that passion. But like, I don't know, it hurts to see it, and especially like seeing it in work as well. Like,
sure,
some of the people you work with, and they like tell you about some of the stuff they've read about them, and it's just like, shit, like, why are there people that's like this?
Yeah. Well, it's just such a weird set of priorities. Like, maybe it's because I have a bunch of other stuff going on, but I can't imagine spending a minute of my time like that. Obviously, there's people with different, in different phases of their life and things like that. I like to believe that most of the people involved in that stuff are really young or something. I know for a fact not all of them are, though. I know for a fact a lot of them aren't. And it's such a bizarre thing. Well, just to quickly kind of go back a little bit, we could probably talk for like 3 hours if we could, but that's probably not good for either one of us. Back before you worked at Ubisoft, and when you did get into, was The Division the first game that you made content for, or were you making content before that?
So I can tell you a story. It's a little bit longer than like just saying, oh yeah, The Division was the first game I made content over, but I think it's quite a funny story. So I've always liked the idea of YouTube, or liked the idea of growing a community, and being someone comes to you and be like, oh yeah, what did you think of this? And like, this is the game I'm playing, what do you think of it? So I can't remember which channel it was that like sort of made me start it, but I created content on Call of Duty. I wanted to be like a trick shotter from like the Modern Warfare 2 days.
Sure.
So like I wanted to get into like FaZe Clan, or like be part of Optic or something like that. And then the cool thing was, a lot of those guys that were playing Call of Duty at the time were also like playing the FIFA game. So I was like, oh, I'm going to follow some FIFA YouTubers. So I sort of like, I've had a ridiculous amount of YouTube channels in my time, but there was the first channel that did kind of well was I had a FIFA channel, and I think I gained like just over 1,000 subscribers, and I was like, back then, like,
for the time, that's a big deal.
Yeah, I think this was 2012 maybe.
Sure.
And I remember again, I was on holiday with my family. I think we were in New York actually for something or other, and I remember reading an email. And I got accepted into Machinima, and they would post my videos or something.
Sure.
But I couldn't get back to them because I didn't have data. And then, I don't know, the channel kind of went... I have no idea what happened with that channel. But then I made another channel, and it was... God, it was a Minecraft channel.
I was about to say Minecraft. I knew it was going to be Minecraft.
Yeah, there was a Minecraft channel where I did like some Let's Plays, or like, I think I did a couple of live streams. And I remember my partner finding it at the time, and she was like, George, who is this that you follow on Twitter? They're called... I don't want to bring up the name now because I don't know if anything remains of that. And I was like, I didn't reply to the text, but I was like, oh God. So I went into the channel, I deleted... Yeah, exactly. I deleted the channel, I deleted the Twitter. I was like, I don't want anyone... Because if you told your friends at that time you make YouTube videos, you would get laughed at. You would get like ridiculed. If you do it now, they're like, holy shit, that's so cool. But yeah, I remember seeing it. I was like, my current partner, obviously, I've been with for close to 10 years now. When she found it, I was like, oh no, she's gonna break up with me. She's gonna think I'm the weirdest kid.
Knows.
Yeah, exactly. Because like when we met, she was like into gigs and stuff, and like went out and like had like this really cool, like opposite life to what I had at the time. And I was like, she's so fucking cool, and she's now with somebody that like makes Minecraft
and
videos.
I'm a nerd.
Yeah, exactly. So I was like, nah, I can't have this. I've got to delete this. So I deleted all of it. And then when we spoke about it, she was like, no, I think it's really cool. Why did you delete that? And I was like,
why did I delete it?
Yeah. And I was like, what if this was the channel that like took me rivaling PewDiePie or something? But it was super cool of her, because obviously she found it and she panicked at the time, thinking like, do I know this person? Like, why is he hiding a separate alias from me? Sure. But yeah, like explain it. We both look back now and like laugh about it, and she'll like tease me and call me by the channel's name sometime, and I'm just like, no.
I may have to shoot some DMs out and see if I can find out what this name was.
I can tell you after. I mean, I don't think there's anything on it now. Anyway,
no, you're fine. It's all good.
And then because she's always been super supportive of what I've done. I mean, I wouldn't have moved to Sweden if it wasn't for her. But
sure.
I remember we had a conversation after this. I think because that was in 2013. Also, the year the Division was announced. At E3. Yeah, and I think I remember seeing it at E3, and I remember speaking to her about it and saying like, "Oh, this looks really cool," because she's always had an interest in games. So it's always been nice that we can like go back and forth about them. And I said, "Oh, this game looks really cool." And we were looking after a friend's house. We were like house sitting or something, and the conversation came up about like YouTube and stuff like that. And she said, "Oh, well, why don't you do a video on like that game you like, kind of like that I found?" I was like, yeah, maybe. But I also didn't want to be that person that sat in his room talking about games again, because it was still kind of a little bit weird.
Sure.
But I did like the first video, and I remember again speaking to her about it, and she said like, I thought it was good. And then I just carried on. And this was how it started for YouTube for me, I guess, was just having somebody that believed in me and in what I wanted to do and was passionate about my passion. Yeah, and that was obviously 2014. And at this time I was working like part-time in a supermarket, and I hated it. I hated everything about it. But I met my partner there, so I guess there is that. But yeah, and I guess things kind of just... Is tumbleweed that always sounds boring, but like a snowboard.
Oh, okay. Sure.
Yeah, because tumbleweed just
they just kind of go around. I get it.
But
yeah, it's and so you go from there. So you know, I'm sure the lead up to the Division was an interesting time to cover that game, and then it comes out, and then it's so funny that I remember my first experience with the Division was the open beta they put out. That it was a fairly small part of the map, I think right around the base of operations, and it was a fairly small demo, but I remember just being like, holy crap, this is amazing. Yeah. Like how is this the game? And because I remembered that 2013 trailer, and even through all the controversy about like you know, everything we know now, that was a weird era for games where like trailers always looked so amazing, but tech hadn't quite caught up yet. And but still it was really cool. But when that game came out, it was a little rough, right? That's kind of known at this point. You know, obviously it developed into something that was very, very good over the years. And over that time, that's kind of when I jumped in. And I think I'd really be messing up if we had this conversation and didn't talk about going to E3 together in 2018 as part of the Ubisoft Star Player program, and how that was so cool. And it's another one of those moments that I don't think at the time we fully appreciated what was happening, because we couldn't have known that 2 years later, a worldwide pandemic would happen and essentially shut everything down. And that like E3 is probably never going to be what it was when we were there. Because even the year after we went in 2019, E3 was weird. They changed a bunch of stuff.
Companies missing or something, right?
Yep. And so it's really interesting to look back, and there was that group of people that we got to go with, especially all the Division people. But like, it's also kind of weird to think that, I don't know if you remember this, but one of the Rainbow Six Siege creators that was there was Binance. And that's Shroud's girlfriend. I think they met through Siege later on after that. I remember meeting her and talking to her, and there was a bunch of people there that, you know, we got to meet. That was like so cool. But yeah, that was what do you remember? Like, what was your favorite part of that whole experience?
Honestly, like, I think that was like the greatest few days of my life. Like,
sure.
I'm not married yet, so I can't get in trouble for saying that. But like, I kind of want to rewind just a tiny bit, because before this, I was invited to ETF for 1.8 of the Division 1.
Yep.
So that was kind of like my first like business or like PR thing in a way. And I was like, I remember that happening and being like, okay, so people clearly care about what I say. People respect me. So I want to carry this on now. And I remember like thinking in my head, okay, like, where do I go next to be like that person that isn't working in a supermarket anymore? Was like the idea in my head.
Sure.
But yeah, that was super cool. Got to meet obviously like the OG Division developers then. But yeah, E3 was so good. Just like I think a lot of, because there was only a couple from the UK, there was definitely only a couple from the south of England. We flew to Amsterdam first, and then we bumped into, or were then all on the same flight from Amsterdam to LA. So we were all like kind of close on the plane.
That's a long flight.
It was a long flight, but we had me and the guy went with Pete. We had the whole row to ourselves. And so I think I had the window seat, and then we just put all our stuff in the middle, and then we could like be comfortable. But yeah, sorry, you mentioned like what was the highlight of that trip? I mean, there was a lot, but like when Julian was on stage talking about the Division 2 was definitely like, I'm here. Sure. And then I think I got interviewed for some news outlet, but I have no idea what happened with that. I think either you or Timmy took a photo of me. I have no idea. Like,
oh, okay.
I've never seen anything.
Yeah.
But I think one of the highlights was the first couple of days there. I was super jet lagged, and I got into the elevator in our hotel, because it was a super fancy hotel, right?
Yeah,
right
that
in the
place
middle
was
of downtown.
Insane.
And I got into the elevator, and I was like, I probably looked hungover or something, but I had my bright orange Star Player t-shirt on.
I remember.
That was slightly too small for me. Yes, I can be too big for clothes. Before Tim says anything. And there was this guy who stood in there with me, and he didn't really say anything until he looked at my t-shirt, and I was like, yeah, like, I'm a big deal, look at me. And I looked up at him, and he's like, oh, what are you here for? And I was like, oh, it's something called E3. It's like all about games, and this is like I'm with Ubisoft. And it's like, oh, that's really cool. I hope you enjoy your time here and whatnot. And I was like, oh yeah, thank you. I was like, that guy has no idea what I just spoke to him about. So he got out of the lift, and then I followed behind him, and I can't remember who it was waiting at the bottom for me, but we were going to go have breakfast. And just everyone was looking at me like, what just happened? And they're like, you just shared the elevator with Yves Guillemot.
Yeah,
and I was like,
okay. I thought I remember that.
Oh, that's who it was. And I was so like, my head was all over the place.
Sir, there's these things called video games, and I don't know, I'm sure you don't understand, but let me tell you about them. And I play the video, like, that's so funny.
And he must have just walked away with like the biggest smile on his face, thinking, bless him. That kid has no idea who I am. But the thing is, like, I knew who he was. I mean, everyone in gaming knows who he is, what he looks like, but I just, for some reason, in the lift at that point, I had just didn't even think about it. And then my aim was for the rest of that trip to get a picture with him.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he wasn't going to remember me. That's fine.
Of course not. Sure.
I could not care less. But we had the E3 after party, which I think everyone has memories from. It was an open bar, so I'm not somebody that can handle drink very well. So a couple of bottles and I'm more than merry.
Cheap date. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I saw him there, and this was still quite early in the night. I think I was with one of the guys that works at Massive now called Frederick, and I said, "Oh, it's Eve. I want to get a photo with him." And he was like, "Well, go on then." And he had like a big group around him, like all guys like dressed in like fancy suits and stuff.
He does. Yeah, it's.
And I was like, "Okay, right. I'm gonna finish my beer and I'm gonna go do it." And for some reason, at this point, I had a bandana around my head as well, which I'd completely forgotten I'd done, and I just barged in there.
Yeah.
Barged in there. I was like, "Eve, please, can I get a picture with you?" And like all of these people in their suits were just like, "Okay, this is a little bit weird." So I like grabbed a couple of selfies. And I just looked on my phone and I was like, "Yep, mission complete." And then that night, we got a taxi back. I shared the taxi with him. Or or maybe not with him, but there was like 3 or 4 like, I guess like SUVs, like the big black like private ones.
Sure.
And I got into it, and I can't remember what they said, but it was pretty much like, "Oh yeah, this is privately booked," and I was like, "Yeah, we're with the party."
Don't you see my shirt?
And then once we got to the hotel, like everyone else got out, and I was like, "Yep, really not setting a good example for myself here." But I mean, aside from the antics, it was just incredible. I mean, meeting you, for example, like we had only ever spoken online. We were both very passionate about the game we loved.
Sure.
And then just being able to meet everyone that had the same mindset of like, I want this game to change my life. I don't just enjoy it. I want this to be a part of my life. So yeah.
Yeah, what was interesting about it to me is that I actually thought the E3 itself, it was okay. It was fine.
Yeah, no, exactly,
it was kind of
because I remember landing,
to a point. Mm-hmm.
And they had already like revealed it and like shown off one of the trailers. I think this was the Xbox.
It got leaked. Someone took a picture of the banner inside the conference. Someone who was in early. Because I remember this very clearly. Someone took a picture of the banner that made it clear it was in DC. That's what, because we didn't know where it was set yet.
Okay.
And I retweeted it. Promptly got a message from like 3 different developers at Massive being like, "Bro, please don't." Deleted my retweet because I felt bad. Like I didn't have to, but I did like feel bad. It's
we
like
were all excited,
they want
right,
this moment.
well?
I was just excited, right?
We were there to experience that. So like I said, when we landed and the Xbox conference had already happened, they had already shown it off. I was like, so we've flown all of this way to see, and it had already been revealed to everyone.
Sure.
So it's like, whilst I was on this flight to LA, everyone's seen it. But then we were there for the Ubisoft conference, and that was just incredible.
Was wild.
So, yeah.
You know what? That whole experience, probably the thing it did the most for me is made me respect the hell out of the Just Dance people.
Yes.
Like those people are crazy. In the best way, like in such a positive way. But I've never interacted with a more wild group of people who just want to dance and laugh and have a good time. Like,
yes,
they probably, unfortunately, have some toxicity in that community, I guess. I bet it doesn't get much patience. I bet they don't get very much attention because those people just seem to just do their thing, man. Because what a lot of people don't know is that obviously we went to the big conference, we went to the E3 show floor, got to do all that stuff, but I don't think it's ever talked about much. And I don't know, I don't think I'm breaking any NDAs here by talking about the Ubisoft experience thing, where we got to go to that hot as hell warehouse where they set up.
God,
yeah. Remember
I felt
that?
So ill because it was so hot.
It was awful, but it was cool. Like because we got to, Eves did his speech to us, and we got to talk to him a little bit. One of my favorite, 2 of my favorite memories from that is one when Skull and Bones was demoing. in 2018 and was like finished. But we know that that's obviously gone through some trials and tribulations. I remember those devs talked to us and were like taking questions. And I remember asking the question because at the time, the idea with that game was it was going to be like the DZ from the Division, but with pirate ships. And I'll always remember saying, hey, have you guys talked to like Red Storm or Massive about how to balance that? Because that can, the griefing and stuff like that can be a problem. And I'll never forget the absolute dismissal of me asking that question and then being like, no, we got it figured out. And well, now it's 4 years later and you still haven't released your game. So I'm just saying.
The only thing I remember that was having to sit on the roof because I thought I was going to be sick. I was
when we
so
took that
hot
awful picture. It was a really cool picture to get, but yeah, it was like 150 degrees out there and it was awful.
So hot.
I also remember that was, if you remember, the Division team, Hamish, and oh my god, so Yannick, Hamish, Petter, Anthony was on the team at that point. I think he had like just started.
Yeah, because me and him hung around quite a lot. We were like a similar age, similar interests. And
remember they were doing the live streaming stuff where they were like mobile.
Yeah.
And they were live streaming. And I'll never forget that there was a moment, and I remember it might have been you and I and Tim and some other people were playing that demo of the Division 2. And trying to go through it as fast as we could. And I'll never forget that I remember Hamish popping in and like saying hi to me or something and me like going to talk to him and him just walking away. Well, I remember later on watching the broadcast, the VOD of it, he was coming to interview me. But I was in the middle of playing, so he didn't want to interrupt me. And I'll never, to this day, I have like, oh my God, I would have talked. I would have put down the controller. I played that demo like 50 times. I didn't need to play it 51 times. And I remember a long time ago, I went back and clipped out that part from the Twitch VOD and like put it on Twitter and was like, I missed my chance at fame. But yeah, that was such a cool experience. And it was mostly because of the people. Like, it was really fun to meet, obviously, everyone. You and Tim's interactions were obviously, a highlight. For me, it was really funny to realize from the state of the games and stuff with the Division, I had this impression that Hamish was very small and that Yannick was very tall. And when we showed up to the conference, I remember being like, Hamish is very large. Yannick, he's about me sized, and that's cool. And then
I can't say anything about this.
Freaking Petter being this freaking monster walking. I had no idea he was so big. It was really fun. And Thailander, I was surprised with how tall Thailander was too. It's
I got
Swedes. All those Swedes are so freaking. They're all giants.
How do you think I feel walking through the studio every day?
Dude, I can't imagine.
Like, George, how are you? I'm like, but is a lot of Swedes at all. Like when I'm playing football with people here as well, it's like there's no point like kicking the ball in the air because I'm just not gonna win it. So, yeah. But you mentioned Thailand. I have to tell this story because it's brilliant. We my first day at Massive. I don't know if we want to talk about how it got there.
That's where I was going next. Yeah.
My first day at Massive. He messaged me and he was like, "Oh, do you want to grab a drink after work?" And I was like, "Well, yeah. Like my girlfriend's not moved here. I've got nothing like
for sure.
planned. Let's do it." So he took me to an English pub, which was like just across the canal, and it's like a very English pub, like dark inside, like oak furniture and stuff.
Authentic, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I walked in, and there's these two guys playing darts, like kind of drunk, and I just heard one of them use the C word as his like missed his dart or something. Yeah, exactly. That's literally what I did. I was like, yep, okay, this is home now. But yeah, I love
for the American audiences. The word is cunt.
Yes, I just don't know.
Here in the States, it's like a big taboo word. It's like such a weird thing. I don't care because I understand from getting to know people like you and especially the Australians that it's just like a colloquial term. You just, hey, buddy. But for anyone who didn't know what he was talking about, I'll throw it out there.
I didn't know how PG this podcast was.
Yeah, dude.
But yeah, that was
like 200 people listen to it. We're fine. That's awesome. That's that. Well, I guess, and we've kind of touched on it when we were talking before, but like, what has, and I know you're not like a dev technically. I think everyone in that building is a dev in their own capacity, but everyone makes the cogs turn, right? But what would you say is the most striking thing, or the thing that in your mind has changed the most since you started working there and have kind of gotten a different perspective?
God. I mean, it's the line of work I'm in, which is content specialist, is like content is a very broad word, but it's like,
Sure.
Screenshots, in-game footage and stuff like that. It's always super interesting. It's pretty different every day. There's a lot of people that are all in the same like engine, I guess. Like all of the cogs go, like one person turns, the other person like is
Sure.
like an oiled machine, let's say. So yeah, it's interesting how big it is, how big the studio is, how many people are there, everything that goes on there. Obviously,
because at this point, it's the whole Avatar team, the whole, I guess now it's the Star Wars team, the Division team, and is the Snowdrop and Ubisoft Connect team there as well?
I mean, that's a lot of teams there.
Yeah. That's crazy.
But lately I've been working very close with the Division, so you would have seen the social media assets we've been producing, and that has been so fun, like understanding how things work, how we capture. Yeah, and that is, and seeing people digest the content as well that me and my team are producing
from the other side. Sure.
Yeah, is because I've always been on that side of like a YouTuber point of view. So like seeing I don't know, like Massive, for example, release a new video, I've always thought like, oh, how will somebody digest this?
Angle? How did they or okay, sure. And how will people take it?
Yeah, but also like how can they produce content about it as well? So it's kind of like it's a completely different perspective. But also, yeah, like you said, like I can't watch game trailers or films or anything like that now without being like, I know how they've done this. Or actually the most recent one I can think of, me and my partner had my parents here for a week of the summer, and we went to I think it's called Malmo Castle Museum, and they had an art exhibition in there. And I saw this really cool transition in like this tape they had done. And I was like, don't go anywhere. I want you to see this transition. And then I'll tell you how it's done. And then she stood there for about the 2 minutes until it got back to the transition. She was like, yeah, that was cool. And I was like, yeah, but this is how they did it. This is how cool it was.
It's like someone who like designs cars, who wants their partner to like revel in this gasket. Like, you wouldn't believe how amazing this gasket is. The way this gasket works is a miracle. And your partner's like, okay, it looks like a piece of rubber to me. I don't know. That's funny.
Exactly. But it's like I said, it's super interesting. I've done like a lot there. Also, without putting a downer on anything, I can't I have to be very careful with what I say. And
absolutely, 100%. I don't want to have to send this to Massive for them to approve it. So be as vague as you can be, because I don't want to have to get this approved. Sure.
I mean, it's common knowledge that I'm working closely with the Division on like a lot of the social content.
Sure.
And yeah, I'm super enjoying it. It's exactly what I came to Massive for. It's exactly what I wanted to do as well, to a degree. So I couldn't be happier with it.
Now, have you only worked there since the new studio, or were you there? I know you did the ETF there, so you were familiar with the old studio.
Well, actually, I did the ETF in Newcastle.
Oh,
it was going to be in Sweden,
okay,
but they moved it to Newcastle.
Interesting. Okay, I didn't know that. That's right. I remember that one because was it Binary Kitten? Were they part of that as well? Okay, so I remember that now. Okay. That rings a bell. Okay. Well, what's that new studio like? Just in generalities. It seems really cool.
I mean, yeah. It's still kind of like one of those feelings that like when you walk into
I work here.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's this big, like massive, like it's kind of like a rusted sign. And I remember that wasn't there when I first went to that studio. And it was only like a few months after I saw it, I was like, oh shit, yeah, this is where I work. And then you go into the reception, that's like a nice, like black matte massive sign, and you're like, yeah,
oh, wow.
This is pretty cool.
I'm doing the thing.
I'm somebody that this has always been a dream of mine. Like I've done some really cool stuff, and obviously I worked with RX Gaming as well for just under a year, like doing YouTube stuff.
That's right.
So like, and even asking him, or like, he always knew that my dream was massive. So as soon as the opportunity came up, he was like super helpful, and I just like to think
he's a really good guy.
Yeah, he's
a very
honestly
good
lovely,
dude.
and we're still in contact today, which is like really nice.
That's awesome.
But yeah, I remember like just thinking, I don't want to come across like, oh, I'm bragging because I get to work at Massive. Like people have jobs.
That's awesome.
And I'm sure there's people at Massive that just see it as a job. But coming from just working in a supermarket, hating it, like mentally, like it just wasn't right for me. YouTube was my escape, and then going from YouTube to full-time YouTube, and then to Massive, it's kind of like, yeah, of course I'm gonna like gas this up. Is what my dream has been. And so when I meet new people here and I'm like, oh yeah, I work at Massive, they're like, oh, what, that's so cool, how did you get there? And then I tell them the story and they're like, holy shit, like that's kind of like the dream scenario. Because I didn't necessarily like graduate university, get like an intern, like kind of how it normally goes, you know, like,
kind of fell into it.
Yeah, and it's just something I'm so proud of, and like my parents are super proud of me. My girlfriend is just ridiculously proud of me. I mean, she lives in Sweden with me now, so
I'm proud of you too, just so you know.
I mean, without the community as well that has always been around the division, I feel like there's a lot of us that are still really tight, and we may not speak for months. I mean, there's times where like we haven't spoken.
It's the reality of adulthood.
Yeah, exactly.
You cannot talk to someone for 2 years and still think they're your friend. It's just the way it is.
And it's brilliant. Like that group of almost like that went to E3, and like I guess we have like YouTube buddies as well in that like scene. It's just so nice that you can see that, and like I'm proud of like what you do. I'm proud of what Timmy does. I'm proud of like all of these people that I've met along the way. And then for them to be like, George, like what you've done, like I'm proud of you. It's
cool.
Just it just feels super nice. And I don't think I'm ever gonna like play it down, because like working in what I do is like was my dream and still is. So yeah.
I think that's a really good way to end it. I have more questions, but I think that's a good note, honestly. Well, that was. Let me make sure there's nothing really cool I wanted to ask. I think that we covered a lot of really good stuff. That's fine. So, well, you are still doing YouTube content. We talked about it a little bit before. So you are mostly focusing on survival games. I enjoy watching your videos because I just don't really have the time or patience to really keep up with all those games. So I think it is really cool. I have an interest in those games. So, I've actually played a lot of Tarkov. I've gotten really into Tarkov, which I know is like a half step towards the type of games
sure.
you're more focused on. And that game's got its own stuff. I don't know. It's an interesting, the world's an interesting place right now. But if people want to check out your content, check out your social media, stuff like that, where should they follow you, or where can they find you?
Yeah, if you want to see my shit posting, it's probably just Twitter. Like, and then you can find all of the links from there, which is rxlyaT, spelled rxlyaT. I always get asked, but yeah, it's pronounced rxlyaT. And yeah, I still tweet a lot about the Division. I mean, it's never going to be something that you fall out of love with, no matter what the community makes you want to believe in.
Sure.
Yeah, and apart from that, it'll be survival games or football. So if you're interested in any of that, then come over and follow me, I guess.
Do it. If you're listening to this, you really should be already. So thank you so much for chatting with me, man.
No, thank you.
I'm sure one day when I get my crap together, I can have you on another time, and we can talk a bit more.
Always happy to do it whenever.
Great. Awesome, man. Okay, and there was our chat. We probably could have gone on for hours, so I'll have to have him on again another time. Please do check him out. I have the links down in the description of the podcast or the video. Check out his Twitter, check out his YouTube. Give the guy some love. I really appreciate him being on the show. And yeah, so I have more guests scheduled. More guests are coming up. I can't wait to bring those interviews to you, so keep an eye out. Follow me on all of my socials that are down in the description as well. And that's all I have for this one. So until next time.